Hello and welcome to the October edition of the BYK-Gardner webinar series. My name is John Kowalski. I'm part of the marketing team here at BYK-Gardner and I'd like to welcome you. Today we're talking about developing a color program. Couple presenters today, Miss Rae Roby. She's our business line manager for automotive, and on the phone is Greg Schreider. He's our key account manager. He is in transit, so apologies to that. But here at BYK-Gardner, customers come first, so you gotta do what you gotta do. So anyway, our format today, approximately a 45-minute-ish presentation. If you have questions, please log them in the chat box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and we'll get to them time permitting. If not, we'll follow up with you individually afterwards. Also, we are recording this, and immediately following, you'll receive an automated link from the marketing team with that recording. Feel free to watch it again, grab screenshots, share it with colleagues, whatever you like. Also, too, these automated emails from marketing, if you have a question after the fact, a week later, don't hesitate, just hit reply and it'll route to me or my team and we'll get it to the right person. So with that, I think I'm going to turn things over to Rae and welcome, Rae. Thank you for your time.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about developing a color program. And just a few things that are important for what we need to talk about when we're talking about color measurement task force. We need instrumentation, of course. We need standards and organizer workflow. We need a good software package. We need to understand how to share the data between all our plants and our suppliers and all those people. And then we need a way to do data analysis. So this works for everyone. So this can be for suppliers, vendors, distributors, customers, and strategic partners. So everything is an external network, but technically we're all working together. So to me, it's more of an internal network. So when we're talking about a color program, there's some things that we need to talk about and some questions we need to ask ourselves. So how are the people doing? Do they understand what they're needed to do, what tasks they're supposed to be accomplishing? Have we added people or lost people? This could be where you need more training or something like that. Also, even existing people, maybe they need updated training based off new equations and different advancements in color. And then how would you rate the color knowledge of your team? This one's really important because if you're just taking measurements and you don't really understand what the data means, you're not getting a benefit from it. And we want to make sure that when you're taking the time to measure, that you can use the results to your benefit. The other important thing is IT infrastructure. So there's many ways you can use our software. You can use it on individual computers where only the person on that computer can access the data. Or you can do things where you share the data internally. This would be like a full SQL server. And then multiple users can access all the data at the same time. So these are important things that we need to talk about before we set up a color program. Also, have my raw material changed? Do I have multiple suppliers? Are there changes in their personnel? What do they understand about color? How is it important to them? What are they doing to improve? All these things are important when we're talking about a color program. And if there's any significant color issues that you've had over the past year and it's cost you some money or some slowdowns to your customers, these are also important questions that we can help you with. And then what are the new goals? So some of the OEMs that I work with, they're now starting to tighten up color tolerancing to make things harmonize better on the vehicle. And these are some of the goals that maybe you set for yourself. Maybe you want to be proactive and start setting up your own internal tolerances that are tighter than maybe what your customer requires, so that you keep yourself out of issues in the future. So the first thing we need to talk about is why this is important. So color harmony and visual acceptance is always important. We don't just want you to measure things and use that pass-fail as your end-all be-all, because we know that visual, in most cases, overrules measurement, but we do want the measurements to be really close to what you're seeing visually. And this is not just for the OEMs, it's also for the maker market. So the first thing we have to talk about is instrumentation. What are we trying to accomplish? What colors are we measuring? Is there effect pigments? What's the inter-instrument agreement? What's the repeatability of the instruments? Is the instrument firmware up to date? When was the instrumentation serviced? Should I have my instruments recertified? New procedures, monthly verification programs, and anything with different geometries. Is there a different instrumentation setup that I should use for a specific OEM or for a specific color family? So we have 3 different instrumentation setups. We have the sphere, we have a 45-0 or 0-45, and then we have multi-angle with or without effect measurement. So first we're going to talk about the 45-0 versus the sphere technology. So these 2 panels, it's one panel, but one is textured and one is not. So if you look at these visually, they don't look very similar at all, but they're the same material. So what does this mean as far as measurement? So for the 45-0 geometry, we have this looks the closest to what we see visually. So for the previous panel, you're going to see 2 different numbers because they're 2 different colors to our eye. So a lot of times the 45-0 technology is used for solid materials or maybe interior applications for automotive, that you want to see the visual difference in your number. So for these 2 panels, a glossy versus a matte finish, you're going to get 2 different curves for your structure or your spectral curves for these 2 different panels, because one is glossier and one is matte, and visually they look different. If we look at the sphere geometry, this is really more for color strength development or weathering studies. And if you had, say, a supplier that was sending you in pellets for your plastics, you want to make sure that those pellets are always the same materials. No matter what happens when you process it, you should get the same outcome. So this is where you use a sphere. And here with the sphere, it doesn't matter if it's glossy or matte, you're going to get the same structure or spectral curve. So just between the 45-0 and the sphere technology, you can see for this particular panel, you're going to get a delta E of 3 with the 45-0 because that's color as we see it. And with the sphere technology, you're going to get a delta E of 0 because this is actually the same material. And then we can talk about multi-angle color plus sparkle and graininess. So normally this is used for the colors that you see on the outside of the vehicle, exterior automotive paint that usually has flake characteristics. And that's what this instrument is designed for. It's directional illumination. So you do have to make sure that you always measure in the same direction with the instrument, or you can get different readings. And it has 6 angles, the -15 through the 110. It has sparkle and graininess measurements. So when we talk about color, in the past, it was always just the color itself. There was no effect pigmentation that was used with the measurement of color. So sometimes the color could be on, but the panels did not look the same or didn't harmonize together quite well enough. That's where the effect measurement comes in. So for the sparkle and graininess, sparkle is set for sunny skies or direct illumination, and graininess is under cloudy skies or diffuse illumination. So for sparkle, you need a spotlight to see the sparkle on the vehicle. So again, direct illumination. The observation angle is critical. There's 3 angles in the instrument for sparkle of 15, 45, and 75. And this gives you an idea of the reflectivity of the individual effect pigments, the amount or concentration of those pigments, and potentially the size of the flakes. For graininess, diffuse illumination, or cloudy sky, you need to be closer to the vehicle in order to see the difference in graininess. And this also gives you an idea of the flake size or type, if your flakes are disoriented or if you have agglomeration. So sparkle is made up of 2 separate components, sparkle area and sparkle intensity. Sparkle area is not actually the individual size of the pigment, it's the total area that is reflecting in the picture that we take. So that's the area. So you could have a large flake with a small concentration or a small flake with a large concentration, and you could have technically the same sparkle area. And this is where it's important to use this in conjunction with graininess, because if your graininess is higher than your sample or your standard panel, then your flake is larger. And if your graininess is less than your sample panel, then your flake is smaller. So it gives you an idea with the 2 in combination, what size of flake you're looking at. And then sparkle intensity is really just how bright that flashback is to your eye. So the normal example that we use is mica versus xerylics. Micas tend to have a lower intensity of the flashback to your eye than a xerylic pigment. So we worked with BMW to help them figure out if they could determine if in the formulations the paint suppliers were actually using xerylic or if they were using mica. Graininess, again, this is one-dimensional from 0 to 15. For solid colors, you should have a graininess of 0. But with the introduction of some new pigments, we are seeing that even solid colors sometimes can agglomerate, and you can actually get a graininess with solid pigments, which is, obviously not acceptable. We don't want to have this appearance on a solid color. We want it to look very uniform. So this is also important for solid colors now. And from 0, which would be fine, up to 15, which is very grainy, and you can see it in the pictures on the screen. So when we talk about what we can see, which is what we always talk about at BYK-Gardner, here the color looks very similar, and we would pass that for color. But if we look at the sparkle on all the angles and the graininess, there's a definite difference between this dark gray coarse and this dark gray fine. So for sparkle and graininess, we can see about a 0.5 difference in sparkle and graininess numbers. So for example, the sparkle 15 here is a 6.3 on the coarse panel, and on the fine panel, it's a 1.3. So that's definitely greater than a 0.5 difference. So we're going to pick that up immediately when we look at the panels. And the other colors, or the other angles, pretty much the same. The sparkle grade for the 75 is not so bad, but the graininess and the 45 are definitely out of tolerance. Another thing that's important when we do a corporate color program is we need digital standards and organized workflow. So for this, we can set up standards that have all of your color tolerancing, your color equation, everything already set up in there, plus your spectral curves. And this helps everyone go to the same center point. So some of the advantages, we can share them or email the standards to all the plants, all the suppliers, anyone who has anything to do with this color can get these tolerances. Like I said, the tolerances can be locked, so the observer, the illuminants have to be always the same, and multiple users can use them and they're targeting the same exact spectral curve. The other thing that's important when we're making a digital standard is that we always measure the same. So this is important because, again, like I talked about earlier, the BYK-Mac is a directional illumination. So if we measure the standards differently every time, maybe with the instrument perpendicular to the panel and then horizontal to the panel, we're going to get different numbers. So consistency and sample preparation for our standards is very, very important. And if we have reformulations due to supply chain issues, really at that point you should reissue your digital standard because your formulation has changed. The other thing that's important, and you can't do this without this, is your inter-instrument agreement has to be very good in order to do digital standards. So here's an example of setting up a digital standard. Here you can define the color parameters for all colors. We call this a color family. So if you have dark metallics, and they're always going to have the same settings, you can have that as one color family. Then every color that you add into there is going to have those same settings already pre-set up. Everyone wants to have a setup for a pass-fail criteria. This can be customer defined. So some customers only want to pass-fail, say, on the color. Others want to pass-fail on color and sparkle and graininess, and some just want to pass-fail on everything. We have specific scales for many, many different customers already set up with their pass-fail requirements in SmartChart. And then, like I said before, you can send and receive these digital standards for your entire supply chain. So the software, the current software that comes with the instruments is a SQL Server Compact Edition. This is what I was talking about before, where you have to have a single user on one computer to access the data. But there are other options. This is the SmartChart software that comes with all of our instruments now. And you can see these are all the different equations that we've set up for some of the different OEMs. There's more than this, but this is just kind of a guideline for what everyone uses. And you want to make sure that you take advantage of all the new features and functionalities, that you have all the OEM updated delta E calculations. And if there's standard reporting that you need to do, you can have those templates also emailed out to all of your supply chain so that everyone's using the same setup for their reporting. And then, of course, we're always here to train you on any new features and functionalities of the software. So data share is something that's become a lot more of interest in the industry, with people working from home and not always being able to get to the plants and looking at things visually. This really helps become a proactive, predictive tool. So, for example, we did a launch in Mexico during COVID and no one could travel. So all the data was sent to us electronically, and we approved colors based off of what we saw electronically, and this saved a lot of time and expense for people then not having to go and travel back and forth to Mexico. So here's the workflow of data share. This happens to be the one that we use for GM. What's important here is we didn't want the data to be one direction, so everything just going to the OEMs. We also wanted, in this case, the fascia suppliers to be able to see the data too, so that they could see what's happening, and that it's not just one-sided where all the data is kind of going into the OEM and then the OEMs regurgitating what they see from the data and telling the suppliers what to do. It's very much a data share between both companies. This is an example of a plot, a scatter plot, and the blue dots represent the body and the yellow dots represent the fascia. And in this example, on the 15, we're quite far apart. In this case, the body happens to be out of spec and the fascia's in. But then we get to the 75 and the 110 angle, and we're looking much closer to harmony. So depending on when I look at this vehicle, I could have different opinions on if it's harmonizing or not harmonizing, depending on the angle I'm seeing at the time I look at it. So it's important that you collect all this information so you can look at it later if maybe your visual assessment changes. So we've worked a lot with the software, trying to make it faster, easier for people to share data. With the way that IT's set up now for individual companies, it's really hard to share data directly with an external company. So we make it where you can make mini databases and then email that data to either your supplier or to your OEM so that you can view the data together. And this is really important because the transparency of the data helps people work better together. So instead of blaming someone for something not being correct, everyone's working together to make improvements and get better color harmony. And then we have data analysis. And in Smart Chart software, we have a lot of different features for data analysis. So for a basic test report for one vehicle, the data can be shown here with the status. So in this case, there's 3 points that are yellow to the standard, which means they're borderline, they need improvement. And there's one position that's green. But we can also measure harmony between the two panels. So on the schematic, the two little double dots show you that there's harmony between the body and the fascia in those positions. So for this vehicle, even though maybe I'm borderline to the master, my harmony on the vehicle is good, and that's what the customer sees. So this vehicle would be shippable, and then in the future, we'd make adjustments to get back to the center point. Here's an example of an entire body. And all of these different points are color keyed so that, or I guess not color keyed, but they're made with a different, like a diamond or a star or something like that. So if you print this out on a black and white computer, you can still see the differences. And this just shows you how a whole vehicle can look and the differences in the different positions on the vehicle. Trending is also important. And so we trend and we compare the data. So we have fascia parts, body parts on this same graph, and you can see how they trend together. The blue happen to be the batch panels, and then the yellow and the red are the body versus fascia positions. So the biggest question we get asked is, how does the data correspond to visual? And this is really important because if the data doesn't match what we see visually, then no one's going to trust it. So we do a lot of work with the OEMs to develop tolerances that make sense to what we see visually. If we see a color that has a problem, with the equation that we're using currently and we need to adjust the factors, we can do that for you too. And we can also go back and take a look at other plant data and make sure we're not creating a situation that is actually not beneficial to anyone. You can get new customers if you have evaluations of your standards. We also have light booths. Do you need to look at it under a light booth? Is your part small enough? Do you need to look at outside? How does outside evaluation work? And these are just some things that you can talk about. And for example, this is about outdoor evaluation. So it's always important to know where the sun is relative to what you're looking at. So for this example in Munich on June 21st, 2021 at 12 o'clock p.m., I have an angle of incidence of the sun of 61 degrees. If I'm in Detroit, same day, same time, I have an angle of incidence of 70 degrees. If I'm in Shanghai, same date, same time, I have an angle of incidence of 82 degrees. And if I'm looking at the evaluation of a flat angle on the hood of a vehicle and the sun's behind me, I'm looking at the 75 or the 110. And if I'm looking at that same horizontal panel and the sun's in front of me, I'm looking at the 15 or even the minus 15 angle. So it's important that we remember that the time of day where the sun is relative to us is important. Where we are geographically, like the different cities I showed you, the same date and time, the sun is not in the same place. What season it is, summer or winter. Also, the size of the people is important. So technically, if I'm shorter than the person standing next to me, I should be closer to the vehicle to look at the vehicle at the same angle that they're seeing. And the distance from the vehicle, like I just talked about, depending on your height, you want to really try to keep that consistent. And then the influence of the evaluation angles. So if you're looking at vertical panels, what angles are you seeing? Horizontal panels, where's the sun again? And then it's very important that we look at the orientation of the add-on parts when they're mounted on the vehicle, because this can change our perception of color too. One other quick point for the orientation of the add-on parts, we recommend that when you measure, you always measure in car position with the instrument and the light coming the same as like the sun would be coming to the instrument itself. So you're looking at it and you're measuring it with the light in the same direction. It's very important because if not, it doesn't match as closely to what you see visually. So here is a light studio. They have a lot of light on the side of the walls, and then everyone can stand in different positions on the floor relative to where the light is to try to figure out what angle they're actually looking at. This is a little complicated because obviously we can't move up and down like technically we would with the instrument, but this is as close as we can get to making sure the observation angles are close as possible. So this gives you good inter-instrument or instrument agreement to your visual evaluation, which is very important so that you are seeing what we're measuring in the same conditions. Here's another example. This one has overhead lighting, so you can look at the roof too. Again, the illumination's fixed at 45 degrees, just like in the instruments. And again, you can move around the studio to try to simulate the different viewing angles. Here's an example of how you would set up lights in a viewing room so that everything's at the same position. And this is the separation between the different lights that you would need to have. And this is our light booth, or you can use it as a light room. The dimensions of the light booth and the luminaire pretty much similar, and the viewing area and the weight of the light booth. So 50 for the light booth itself and 40 kilograms for each luminaire. And then again, the spacing is important. For our lights in particular, we meet all of the visual international standards for solid colors, and this is just a list of all of them. Again, you'll get a copy of this presentation and the recording of the video, so you can listen to it and you can read through these. They're very specific for each test method. So for our lights, what we've done is we added LEDs, and this gives us the closest to D65 as possible. So on the right side, you can see there's some spikes in the blue curve, and that's where these fluorescent tubes actually have spikes because that's how they generate the light, and that's the light source that you're using. And what we try to do is smooth this out so that it matches closest to the D65 as possible. So for the multi-angle instrument, illumination at 45 degrees, detection at 6 angles, minus 15, 15, 25, 45, 75, and 110. The minus 15 we usually only use for color shifting pigments like chroma flares, stuff like that. And those are the ones that shift maybe from like green to red or purple to yellow or something like that. And that's where you use the minus 15 angle. These colors aren't that popular as they used to be. They're really hard to control, and it's really hard to get harmony on those vehicles. So now when we have the minus 15, it's usually a much subtler shift, maybe on a silver going from like blue to maybe yellow on that minus 15 angle, which is still important for harmony, but it's not as crazy as like the red to the green transition pigments. Sparkle characteristics, again, the 15, the 45, and the 75, direct illumination. And the camera detection is in the middle at 0. For the sparkle, the 15 angle usually is material related. So if I don't have the correct flake, I could get a difference maybe in sparkle intensity. Or if the flake size is not the same, I could get a difference in the sparkle area. So back to that Zerillic mica example, if you had a Zerillic, your sparkle intensity would be much higher on the 15. And if you had a mica, your sparkle intensity would be much lower on the 15, and you would see the difference there. For the 75, this is usually process related. So if my flakes aren't laying down flat on my panel or my part, then there's light being reflected back to the detector when technically they should be flat and the light should not be being reflected back to the detector. And that's what the 75 is used for, is to look for process differences. And then graininess is diffuse illumination. Again, the same camera detector at 0 degrees, but this is your diffuse illumination. So your graininess, salt and pepper look, something like that. Looking under light boost, this is the standard setup that most companies use. So this is an overhead luminaire system, and it's important that you define where you're viewing, because you're changing the observation angle and not the illumination angle. You just have to be careful with how you're doing this. So when you're manually tilting and everything, you really need to simulate what viewing angles you're looking at. So for example, this is what a lot of people use. The face, the flash, and the flop are the angles that we refer to when we're looking at things in the light booth. The face, you can see, is pretty much straight on to your viewing angle. The flash is down below, almost against the tabletop at a 45-degree angle, and the flop is actually coming away from you, the reflection of the light. So this isn't exactly perfect to how we do it with the illumination in the instrument itself, but this is the best guidelines we can give you to make those numbers match as closely as possible. So again, here, the face, you're illuminating at 45 degrees. You're viewing straight on, and your specular reflection is at 45 degrees off the viewing angle. If we look at the flash, now we're illuminating at 10 degrees, and our viewing angle from specular reflection is minus 15. So this is not how we do it in the instrument again, but we're just giving you examples to show you what you can do in the light booth to match as closely as possible to the instrument. And then here's the flop. So now we're illuminated 25 degrees, and our viewing angle from specular reflection is around 75 degrees angle. So like I was talking about before, the visual evaluation and the instrumental evaluation, especially in these light booths, it's not perfect, but as long as we're aware of the differences in what we're actually looking at, we can at least understand the difference between what we see visually and what the instrumental evaluation is going to be. We also have a BYK spectra effect booth, and this does multi-angle color and sparkle control. And this instrument has a dial on the side, and it matches exactly how we illuminate and how we view in the BYK itself. And we can also do sparkle for the 15, 45, 75 angles in this booth also. So here's an example of the angle, how you can move this little handle to get the angle that you want, and then the panels sit in this tray, and you can move the table pivots and the illumination stays consistent. The inside of the BYK spectra effect, just to give you an idea, this whole table moves. The illumination source is at the top of the L on the table, and the whole table tilts. The only thing that changes is our viewing angle. So that matches exactly what we see in the instrument. So this angle this instrument we really recommend for people who are doing really tight evaluations of effect pigments, because you can see exactly what the instrument's telling you on the same exact angles. I think it's really important that people use this in especially development maybe of new pigmentations or new effect pigments. And again, you can see how we move it depending on the different angles. And then we do have the same 15, 45, and 75 direct illuminations as we do in the instrument for sparkle. An example is here. So we can see these two panels for the sparkle are very different. But if we just looked at them for color, we wouldn't see that much of a difference between the two, because the majority of the change is in the effect. So it's important to remember for effect finishes, we need all 6 angles, 5 angles for sure, possibly 6. The 3 illumination angles, 15, 45, 75 for sparkle, and the graininess illumination in the instrument, but we don't have that in the BYK spectra effect per se, because all of the angles that you look at for color are diffuse illumination, so it is taking care of that in that instrument too. And the one thing that we really want to make sure that we tell you guys very strongly is that we believe in ongoing training and support from us to make sure that your color program is very successful. Thank you very much, and now we can have some questions.
Oh, color program, is that it?
That's it.
That's it, huh? Wow. Yeah. you just packed in a whole lot of information. You need to take a drink of water,
I
even
do.
for 40 minutes straight. It's like she's gonna give out. Her voice is going to give out any minute now. Um, so yeah, if anyone out there has questions, log them in the Q&A or the chat box. I think it's in the right-hand corner of your bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Do that. Ray's here. We got Greg on the line. Got some other folks too to help. Okay, first
So
question.
if good. Sorry. Do you have a question?
Yeah. First question. I work in the wood industry where we have different colors on the wood with different structures. Will this technology work for wood? And me adding on, how would someone set up a type of color program, where they are, producing wood products?
So when he says different textures, I'm not sure what that means.
Different structure.
Structure, yeah, I'm not sure. Like,
Yeah, I'm assuming textured surfaces that are colored. Let's see. I'm not even gonna try and pronounce your name, sir. So I'm gonna unlock your microphone. If you want to unmute yourself and further kind of elaborate on that question, we'd love to have an open discussion with you. And the microphone, it should be towards the upper right-hand corner, a little circle with a microphone. If you just click on that, you can unmute yourself if you're able to. I don't know if they're able to, but I guess while we're waiting, Ray, I mean,
so this is what I would suggest. I would really suggest that you have one of us come in and take a look at your samples to see what exactly is going on, because there's so many different options. I wouldn't want to not look at the samples before I made a recommendation. But yes, you can definitely set up a program for anything that has to do with color, where you're trying to match something else, different lots or something like that. We can definitely set up a program for you. It's
additional comment, sorry to interrupt here. An additional comment, consider a smooth surface, for example, for instance. So a smooth surface wood product.
So if it's a smooth surface for a wood product, the only complication is how much grain variation do you have, right? So like I can see my wood floor now, depending on where I measure it, I'm going to get slightly a different number. So my biggest suggestion would be to take a lot of measurements and take the average and try to match it that way. And Greg might have a suggestion. I see he's unmuted. Go ahead, Greg.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Welcome.
So one of the challenges is with wood is how repeatable is the sample preparation, and that's something that you can easily test by making the same sample on several different substrates or several different pieces of material, because the absorption into the wood is going to be different. And again, going back to Ray's discussion about whether or not you want to see differences in your numbers or you don't want to see differences would be, 45-0 just for your discussion.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Yeah, a lot of things to take into account, and just additional complications. Well, not complications, but challenges to overcome with wood surfaces. So we'll definitely reach out to you and get one of our regional reps in there, and to take a look at your samples and see what we can do and how we can help. And Greg, I just muted your microphone. We were getting a lot of noise, so unmute if you want to talk again. Another question or comment, I guess. David thanks for reaching out. He was also interested in us reaching out to him in setting up a color program. He works for a hair coloring company where they assess hair dyes. So yes, we'll make a note and reach out to you on that as well. And I guess, go ahead.
Well, for hair specifically, the sample prep is huge. And you almost, because you're taking the hair dye, and I assume this is how you guys do it, and you're putting it over different colors of hair, those initial hair samples really need to be consistent. So you should measure before and after to make sure your sampling process is correct. So it's like using the same primer all the time in automotive. Just an example.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I mean, so often it really doesn't matter what the topic is that we're discussing, but so many times it's all about sample prep and doing it consistently every single time from every plant through every shift. And also when you're doing those measurements, taking measurements consistently every shift, every plant, because then you're getting a true, apples to apples. Any variations in those measurements or in the sample prep is going to throw off the data, and you're not going to be as accurate as you could be.
Yeah, so we have, we're continuously trying to get, in automotive specifically, them to take more and more measurements, because the more measurements you have, the more you can find where you have a blip. And it's something that's actually process related or something changed or something like that. If you don't have that data, you cannot always tell that something changed and that it's significant, that you need to do something about it, because you don't have enough data to back up that point, And when you do those special projects and stuff, you really need to have that type of information in order to be able to do those projects, because if not, people don't think there's a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's very important. Of course, we always want to catch the huge outliers where, a customer gets the vehicle and they're going to reject it, or the flooring from 2 different lots don't match and someone puts it in their house. This is also a big problem, right? Because then you'd have to be replacing the entire floor, which isn't the best thing either. So it's all about cost and what customers feel is important, which for them, it's uniformity and consistency of the material, right? Whether it's automotive or flooring or hair. If I have the same color hair and I always want it to be the same color of purple, say, I need to make sure that those pigmentations that are in that hair color is exactly the same, so that my hair always turns out the same color.
Yeah.
So it's the same idea, it's just different application, correct?
Exactly. And yeah, folks, we got some time left, so get your questions in here in the chat. We'll talk to Ray, and Greg can ping in too, and we have one of our applications people on the line also. So until we get more questions in, Ray and we can just chat, because that's what we like doing. In your slides, I really liked how you right at the beginning of the presentation, you separated internal network versus external. Internal being, R&D, design, tech services, production, QC and QA labs, and then externally, suppliers, vendors, customers, strategic partners, distributors. But really, internal versus external, you're using the same methodology in your color program, the same elements, I guess. You have that instrumentation, your standards and organized workflow, then the software data share, data analysis, and then, full circle back to your instrumentation. It is, to me, from my standpoint, I've been around a little bit, colored, not to the technical degree you and in your experience, but is that the logical progression? If someone either has a color program or parts and pieces of a color program, is that the progression you recommend they start in first, taking a look at your instrumentation, making sure it's consistent, all the firmware is consistent and updated, and all of those key things that you went into, and then moving on to the standards and organized workflow and kind of around that
So
horn.
some of it you can do in conjunction,
Okay.
but the instrumentation, if you don't have instrumentation that is repeatable and reproducible and good inter-instrument agreement and good temperature, humidity, stability, then pretty much it's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Because those things are really, really important. If your instrumentation isn't going to be exact, then you are adding more error in to the system, which is what we're trying to take out.
Yeah. And that's really from what I see is the foundation. And every piece of these 5 elements are absolutely critical, but with instrumentation, that's starting your foundation. So if you're starting it with deficiencies, the other 4 components, can't be their best or can't be, as good as they can be. Is that a fair statement?
Very fair. And if we, like the digital standard, before our instrumentation, I used to work in automotive paint, and with those extra sources of error, you couldn't always make sure you're going to the exact same thing, same standard. And so that added a lot of error. And then people are kind of chasing data, which doesn't even match someone else's data. And it's not helpful at all. It's actually more confusing.
Yeah.
So the setting it up and using the right instrumentation is the biggest challenges to do. And the processes, the procedures have to be the same. And like I mentioned several times, for the BYK-Mac, because it's multi-directional, direct illumination, that one, if you don't measure always the same time or the same way, you're going to have different results. So we had, at one of the OEMs, they kept telling me something's going on second shift. The data is always different. And they're like, what could it be? And we realized that it was how they were holding the instrument when they measured. Just that simple caused a huge problem where they thought there was an issue with second shift.
Yep.
That's the plant. So these are significant things. Yeah. Yeah.
Consistency is the key. That's for certain. Another question here what about developing a color program for for molded in color masters or color chips for auto interior? Any
So of course, so that would, for me, if you're looking at it from the OEM perspective or from the supplier perspective, you want everything to match. So I would use a 45-0 geometry instrument for that. But we also have the profiler that measures texture, which texture is huge on the interior of the vehicle. Because if your texture doesn't match, your color will never match. So it's very important.
Okay. Can you explain that a little bit? If your texture doesn't match, then your color doesn't match.
So the texture, I mean, on the inside of your vehicle, like a lot of times there's like leather grain texture that's molded into the color panels. So if that texture has different sizes or shapes or different spacing between different heights, it's going to look different. Even if you spray the exact same paint on both panels, visually it's still not going to look the same. So texture for me on interior is almost bigger than color in a way.
Yeah.
Because without the texture component, you really can't make sure that your color and your gloss is correct.
Very true.
And the gloss on the textured surfaces is also something you need to be careful with, because depending on where you measure with the gloss meter, you can get different answers. So that's why our Spectra 2 profiler is important, because it does reflectivity off of the hills and the valleys. And that gives you a better idea of what's actually happening on the surface of your coating and with your texture than just a gloss measurement.
Yeah, definitely some more things to take into consideration, as opposed to a flat color. So nice. What we have 5 minutes left. Any last questions, or Ray, any parting words of wisdom for someone that is looking to start a color program, or has one partially in place, but could always be optimized?
I think my biggest idea would be to contact us. Let us help you start it off. We've
Yeah.
done this a few times,
Yeah, a
and
couple.
we would like to help you. And
Yep.
if you're doing something already set up and it's not working correctly, we can come in and evaluate how you're doing things currently and
Yep.
help you get back on track.
Yep. Yep. And it's back on track. Saving money, saving scrap. Reducing scrap and waste.
Hmm.
Improving. Accepted parts and components.
And it really helps with this type of program. Everyone, like we have stakeholders here, everyone is a stakeholder. And if
Yep.
everyone's working together to get better, then it's a much easier way to work than having people blame the other person, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
You're all on the same page, you're really trying to get to the same point.
And the fact that you have the software and the data sharing and data analysis, I mean, if you're measuring everything, that takes the, finger pointing away. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, here is where we've isolated this issue. All right, what's going on? Like that supplier that you just mentioned, the second shift was just holding the instrument slightly different. That's
Mhm.
just a thing, a simple adjustment, and now they're back on track.
Yes.
And and I know, because you come from the automotive world, but this program can be done, anything with color, right? Whether
Yes.
you're, manufacturing lawnmowers or, 3C or an appliance, it doesn't matter. It's all the same
Airplanes.
pieces. Airplanes, yeah, marine,
Yeah.
whatever. So,
Yeah.
good conversation, Ray. Thanks. And yeah, sorry, I get caught up and excited about this stuff too, because I'm always learning. From the marketing side, we hear bits and pieces and work on projects, but it's good to hear the whole deal, the whole color program in its entirety, and what are the elements. And it's just I don't know, it's exciting for me. It's an
And
illness, I know.
and one thing I can say too is I know it's a lot of information I gave you today, but we're here to
Yeah,
help.
yeah,
So, and normally if we look at your parts and the situation and talk to you for a bit, we can normally come up with
hmm
definitely ways to improve,
yeah,
if not set it up completely.
yep. No, that's awesome. And yeah, so those with the comments, we'll get in touch with you, and get someone into your facility just to take a look and help out and see where we can help with improvements. Everyone else, like I said, you'll get this recording, this link. Feel free to share it around your facility. Grab screenshots, whatever you need. If you have any questions looking through it, if you have any questions that just come to mind later today or next week or next month. Any of the marketing messages you get, if you don't know who your regional sales rep is, you can just hit reply to any of the marketing stuff. It'll come to my team, and we'll route it to the appropriate person. In your region, we have regional sales reps, technical people all over the country and world, to that effect. So yeah, reach out and let us know how we can help you. So with that, thank you, Ray, for sharing your expertise, your experience, and just on this topic of setting up a color program. Thank you to everyone who attended. I hope you learned something, and we hope to see you on future BYK-Gardner web seminars. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks,
Thank
Ray.
you, everyone. Bye bye.